Welcome to EduCasts, home of EduCasters. Imagine a student sitting in a classroom, their eyes fixed on a presentation slide or a textbook. The subject matter, whether it's the physics of a pendulum, the syntax of a new language, or the intricacies of the U.S. Constitution, is challenging. If they struggle, the immediate reaction is often to blame motivation, effort, or even ability. But what if the true villain isn't a lack of drive, but a fundamental mismatch between the way the material is presented and the hardwired limitations of the human mind? For decades, educators often operated on intuition, feeling their way through curriculum design. But the rise of cognitive load theory, CLT, pioneered by Australian educational psychologist John Sweller in the late 1980s, offered a scientific lens, a genuine blueprint for effective instruction. CLT is rooted in the architecture of human memory. It posits that instructional effectiveness hinges on how well we manage the load placed upon the learner's working memory, the small, temporary mental workspace where conscious intellectual activity takes place. If we overload this limited resource, learning grinds to a halt, no matter how bright or motivated the student is. This will demonstrate that cognitive load theory is far more than a technical psychological concept. It is the essential framework for modern, evidence-based pedagogy. We will pull back the curtain on the cognitive structures that govern learning, dissect the three critical types of cognitive load that every teacher must understand, and explore the robust set of instructional principles derived from CLT that transform classroom practice from guesswork into a science of efficiency. By understanding how the mind learns, we can stop accidentally sabotaging our students' efforts and start designing lessons that truly stick. To grasp CLT, we must first accept a non-negotiable truth about the human mind. Our information processing system, while infinitely powerful in its long-term potential, possesses a crippling built-in bottleneck. 1. The bottleneck, working memory. Working memory is the star, or perhaps the tragic hero, of cognitive load theory. Think of working memory as the mental kitchen counter, where all conscious cognitive cooking happens. It's where we temporarily hold the phone number we just heard, where we calculate 17 times 4, and where we try to follow the steps of a complex procedure. The critical characteristic of this counter is its astonishingly small size. Research, most famously from George Miller, suggests that WM can only handle about 4 to 7 elements or chunks of information at any given moment. Furthermore, this information can only be retained for about 15 to 30 seconds without active rehearsal. If the counter gets too cluttered, new ingredients spill off, and old ingredients are forgotten. When this happens during instruction, the student is not learning. They are simply struggling to hold the pieces in place. In CLT terms, any instruction that forces a student to juggle too many new, disconnected pieces of information simultaneously will overwhelm the working memory and prevent the successful construction of knowledge. The learner is spending all their mental energy managing the load, leaving none left for actual learning. 2. The solution, long-term memory and schemas. While working memory is the bottleneck, long-term memory, LTM, is the nearly infinite repository. Unlike the short-lived, tiny counter of WM, LTM is vast, permanent, and the true engine of intelligence. Everything we call expertise, from riding a bike to solving a quadratic equation to effortlessly identifying a bird species, is stored here. The key to LTM's power is the schema. Schemas are highly organized knowledge structures, mental blueprints that group interconnected elements of information into a single, cohesive unit. When you look at the letters DOG, you don't process 3 separate letters. You process one schema, the concept of a dog. This is efficient. Here is where the architecture integrates with the theory. A novice learning algebra might see the expression x plus y to the squared as 5 separate elements, x plus y to the squared. Their working memory is instantly overloaded. An expert sees x plus y to the squared as one schema, a squared binomial. They don't have to consciously hold all 5 pieces. The schema is retrieved from LTM and occupies only one slot in working memory. Learning, according to CLT, is the process of acquiring, automating, and structuring schemas in long-term memory. The goal of instruction is to facilitate this schema acquisition, and the only way to do that successfully is by carefully managing the burden placed on working memory. If we can bypass the WM limitation by efficiently building these schemas, learning becomes effortless, or at least manageable. The 3 pillars of load management. Cognitive load theory is predicated on the idea that the total load experienced by working memory, CL total, is the sum of 3 distinct types of load. An effective instructor must act as a load manager, minimizing the bad load and optimizing the good load. CL total equals CL intrinsic plus CL extraneous plus CL germane. 1. Intrinsic cognitive load, ICL, the inherent difficulty. Intrinsic cognitive load is the load imposed by the nature of the learning material itself. It is the inescapable difficulty of the subject. Defining element interactivity. The primary determinant of ICL is element interactivity. This refers to the number of separate pieces of information that must be processed simultaneously in working memory to understand the material. Low ICL example. Learning a vocabulary list, e.g., matching chien to dog. This is low interactivity because each pairing can be learned relatively independently. You don't need to know cat to learn dog. High ICL example. Learning to balance a chemical equation, e.g., CH4 plus O2 result to CO2 plus H2O. To understand this, you must simultaneously consider the elements CHO, the subscripts, the coefficients, and the rule of conservation of mass. All elements are highly interdependent. You can't learn one part in isolation. Instructional implications for ICL. ICL is unavoidable. You cannot make balancing a chemical equation fundamentally easy. However, you can manage it through simplification, segmentation, and sequencing. 1. Simplification. Break down complex, highly interactive tasks into manageable, low-interactive prerequisite parts. Before asking a student to solve the full chemical equation, teach them the concept of balancing one element at a time, e.g., just H and O in a simpler compound. 2. Segmentation. Present material in small, digestible chunks, allowing the learner to pause, process, and perhaps form a preliminary schema before moving on. This is why well-designed tutorials break down complex software use into short, isolated video clips. The goal here is not to eliminate challenge, but to ensure that the challenge is productive. We want students focused on the inherent difficulty, not the unnecessary struggle caused by poor presentation. 2. Extraneous cognitive load, ECL, the preventable clutter. Extraneous cognitive load is, bluntly put, the bad load. It is cognitive effort that is wasted because it is caused by ineffective or poorly designed instruction. ECL does not contribute to schema construction. It actively interferes with it. The cardinal rule of CLT is to minimize extraneous cognitive load. ECL is created when instructional methods force students to spend mental effort on activities that are peripheral to the learning goal. Sources of extraneous load. Split attention effect. This is perhaps the most common culprit. It occurs when a learner is forced to mentally integrate multiple, physically separated sources of information. E.g., looking at a diagram on one page, reading the key text, explaining it on another, and listening to a disconnected lecture. The mental effort required to visually search, shift attention, and hold these separate elements in working memory is all extraneous load. Redundancy effect. This happens when the same information is presented in multiple formats, when one format is sufficient. For instance, reading a graphic-heavy slide while the presenter reads the exact same text aloud. The auditory text becomes redundant to the visual text, and the learner wastes energy comparing and reconciling the two identical sources. Novelty in presentation. Unnecessary visual flair, jarring animations, or distracting background music The bells and whistles that don't add educational value also act as noise that increases ECL. If an instructor presents material in a confusing, cluttered, or fragmented way, they are essentially piling non-essential boxes onto the student's mental countertop, leaving no room for the ingredients of the lesson. 3. Germane cognitive load (GCL), the learning fuel. Germane cognitive load is the good load. It represents the working memory resources specifically dedicated to the deep, meaningful processing required for schema construction and automation. GCL is the effort spent on understanding the relationship between the pieces of information and integrating them into LTM. Sweller later conceptualized GCL not as a separate category of load, but as the effective mental resources remaining when ICL and ECL have taken their share. If the total cognitive capacity is 100% and 20% is taken by ICL and 60% is wasted on ECL, only 20% is left for GCL, actual learning. Maximizing GCL. The goal of all CLT-informed instructional design is a two-step process. 1. Step A. Minimize. Radically reduce ECL, wasted effort, through clean, integrated design. 2. Step B. Optimize. Free up maximum working memory capacity, which then allows the learner to direct their remaining mental energy toward GCL, schema construction. GCL is the effort that feels productive, the aha moment when concepts click together. While GCL can be cognitively taxing, it is rewarding because it leads directly to durable learning and expertise. It is the work of abstraction, reflection, and connection.